A lot of times I use music and a mantra to get myself settled, and sometimes people use a prayer before the sermon. I'm going to not sing loud, but sing a song that I think many of you know. It is something which I use to settle myself at times, and I think you'll recognize the words, which I will sing gently into the microphone. Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on me. Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on me. Melt me, mold me, fill me, use me. Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on me. Amen. Well, it's no secret to anybody that's here today that we are living in difficult times. And I had so much hope for the year 2020. In fact, when I visited my eye doctor, I said, isn't it wonderful that 2020 is here? We should have great wisdom and vision in this year. Well, lo and behold, that vision has quickly clouded over, far worse than my cataract, which I had operated on before COVID, luckily, in February of this year. Difficult times face all of us. COVID-19 is high on our list. The increase in tropical storms, wildfires. I know we hear a lot about the ones in California, but my sister-in-law, Susan, my wife's sister, is out of a home in Masonville. She had to abandon that home because fires were so close. So she's staying in an art studio right now. Second time she's had to leave her house. We're in a stormy political time. Uptick of violence, hate messages. It sounds like my sermon is about doom and gloom. In the first part of it, yes, it is about doom and gloom. It reminded me of the doomsday clock, which has been set. I'm going to show this to you in a minute. I'm going to hold it up first to the camera so people at home could see it. And looking at this, it looks like an EKG, doesn't it? And like EKG. What it is a record from 1947 to the present of the doomsday clock, which is run by a group of atomic scientists who, after the Second World War, were concerned about nuclear possibility of destroying the human race. And so they set the clock back then, it's a metaphor, of course, at 7 minutes to midnight. That's the amount of time that we need to do something about what's happening in the world. And over the last years, they meet twice a year, and they reset it based upon what's happening in the world in terms of the threat of nuclear war, situations such as the political scene, storms, the environmental problems we face. On the 20th of January this year, they met, and they set it as close as possible to midnight, the closest it has ever been, 100 seconds, 1 minute and 40 seconds. That's how close we are to being stupid enough to do something that will destroy us as a race. Scary times indeed for us. The second image I want to share this morning is of a vault, a seed vault, that is in Svalbard, Norway, 1,200 kilometers from the North Pole. This is a vault that houses all kinds of seeds that should a catastrophe happen, we'd have seeds that we could then bring out to try to replant, that people would have food around the world. There are 36 vaults like this, but the main one The main one is this called up in Norway, which houses over 1 million kinds of seeds. Who knew there were that many kinds of seeds? It has been updated because the permafrost it sits on has been weakening because of the environmental changes. And there was a danger of some of the water melting from the permafrost coming into it, so they had to do some renovations of it to protect it even more. It was open this year to bring in 60,000 more kinds of seeds. And some of those seeds belong to the Cherokee tribes. They had corn brought in, a corn seed to grow corn, which is not only food for them, but part of their religion, part of their spirituality. And they also had brought in some beans, and then a type of squash that actually would be able to be outside of refrigeration for over a year before spoiling. For the first time in history, back in 2015, some seeds were taken out of this vault to help replenish a vault that was in Syria that had been destroyed by the civil war happening in that country. Doomsday, all around us. But how is this a sermon for us this morning? Well, we turn to First Thessalonians. This probably is the earliest of the letters that Paul wrote. Earlier than the Gospels. Scholars think probably it was written sometime around 50, 51 in the Common Era. So about 20 years after, or less than that, of crucifixion of Jesus and the experience of Easter. The fact that death is not the end, but life is stronger than death. And love is stronger than hate. The resurrection of Jesus Christ. And that's important for us to hold on to and remember this day. He is giving great praise to the people in the church in Thessalonica. It was a city in Macedonia under the authority, of course, of the Roman Empire. Now, they were having difficult times, as you can well imagine. The Romans believed in many gods, but the emperor, Caesar, insisted upon his being worshipped as a god. He was that kind of leader. He wanted to have and demanded the worship of the people. And he had coins made, silver coins that had, guess what, of course, his image on it. Naturally, what else? And that was used to help pay the taxes. If you had to pay taxes, which you had to do, if you were part of the Roman Empire, the Peace of Rome, you had to pay taxes, and they were hefty. They oftentimes used Jewish people because they knew the neighbors. They knew how much neighbors were actually worth. So they spied on their neighbors so that taxes could be collected from them. And they paid with the denarius. I'll say more about that later because that's part of the gospel lesson we had this morning. Great praise for the church in Thessalonica. The people there were struggling, but their hope was based not on somebody coming along to rescue them, no political process, but their hope was in God. Their hope was in Jesus Christ. That God has given them the power, the strength, the gifts of the Spirit, the fruits of the Spirit, to be able to sustain whatever happens to them and succeed in their faith and in their lives. It wasn't just clergy. Paul was the clergyman visiting there, but everyone witnessed to the love and the truth and the power of God in their lives. Now, a lot of times Paul gets a bad rap. If you read some of the letters of Paul, you know he's kind of old-fashioned in many ways, according to our standards today. Women don't like Paul because he says some pretty bad things about women in terms of, they should have their heads covered in church. Uh-oh, I don't see. Too late. And then women were not supposed to speak when assembled in the church, in the service. That would be a pretty quiet church these days if women were not allowed to have those kind of leadership roles in the church. Before me sits the moderator of the Woodmont UCC Church, Beverly, my friend, who I love dearly, and my wife, Ann, who's the vice moderator of that church. And believe me, they do speak. As evidenced today in my ride up here, they do speak in the car when they are doing some things about the church. And that's important to know. But Paul, in many ways, was very current in his understanding of how people were to be. Paul was not a tyrant. He was as a Pharisee, but not as a dispenser of grace. Later on in his letter, I'm going to read for you certain verses that might be used next week, depends upon who the pastor is coming in, because it's next week's lectionary. But from the same book, 2nd chapter, 5 through 12, listen to how Paul is so eloquent in his appreciation and love for the people in that church. As you know, and as God is our witness, we never came with words of flattery or with a pretext for greed. Nor did we seek praise from mortals, whether from you or from others, though we might have made demands as apostles of Christ. But we were gentle among you, like a nurse tenderly caring for her children. So deeply do we care for you that we are determined to share with you not only the gospel of God, but also our own selves, because you have become very dear to us. That's a leader. That's how Paul was trying to build this church up, build this community of faith up. And it was indeed very powerful. Paul knew that these people were rich with seeds in their lives. He had planted a seed in each one of them that was to grow in fertile ground, the fertile ground being the community itself of love and support in the church. People helping and caring for each other, supporting each other, not being overly critical of each other, but accepting and loving and supporting. He lists those fruits of the Spirit, not in this particular letter, but in another letter, also early, maybe the second earliest letter of Paul, to the church in Galatia, where he says, the fruit of the Spirit is love and joy and peace, patience and kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and one I have most problem with, self-control. Self-control. These are the fruit of the Spirit. Today, when you leave the church and put your offering for the church and for God's work in the offering plate, we have instead a fruit of the Spirit bowl, which lists the 9 fruits of the Spirit that I've just shared with you. So you can put your fruit of the Spirit, the seed grown, into your commitment financially to the life and ministry of the church. The church needs to be the place where these gifts, where these fruit of the Spirit have been deposited. Not to be saved, but to also be dispensed out into the world that needs so much these gifts of love and joy and peace and patience and kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control, the gift of teaching, the gift of wisdom, the gift of compassion, the gift of love, the gift of faith. The world needs you to dispense that, having grown that seed in the community of faith known as North Church in New Hartford. Too often, when a church comes to sharing the light of Christ, they're more like taillights than headlights. Driving in the car, if you have headlights on, you can see where you're going. You have a clear path ahead. The automobile becomes your vehicle to dispense seed, to dispense faith into the world. But sometimes people who don't claim faith are actually ahead of the game. More compassionate, more loving, more concerned about what's happening in the world than people who should be the dispenser of the seeds that God's given to us. Now, tail lights are also important. If you need to follow the stream, it's important to have a tail light on. Many times I've been driving in the fog, and I can't see a thing ahead of me, but luckily for me, oftentimes there is a car ahead of me. And I can't see the road, but I can see those taillights. And they help me drive safely to my destination. It's a lot riskier when that car turns off. And now it's up to me to take responsibility for my journey. But that's what God asks of us in the church. Now, turn to the gospel, an ongoing problem with the Pharisees. I don't know about you, but sometimes people flatter me. And I wonder, what are they flattering me for? What have I done? Not much. And I confess that I sometimes get very suspicious of them when they are being too flattering to who I am. And that's the way with Jesus. Oh, we know you are sincere, Jesus. Oh, we know you teach the way of God. Oh, we know that you show no deference to anybody, that you show no partiality. Let us ask you a question. It's one of those gotcha kind of questions. They know the answer, but they're trying to trick him and trap him. This happens in politics too. I'm going to be even-handed today. Trump oftentimes was asked over and over and over again, will you leave the White House if you lose the election? That's a gotcha question because they know the answer. Biden, is it your intention to pack the Supreme Court with additional judges if you become president? And both have been skillful in not trying to answer that gotcha question. And so is Jesus. Let me see the coin. Whose head is on this coin? Oh, it's Caesar. Says he's the emperor. Now, why did the Pharisees have a silver coin? When they paid their bills, they used copper coins. They came prepared to trick Jesus. Render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. Render unto God that which belongs to God. Sometimes, though, I have to admit, it is hard for us to understand what is Caesar's and what is God. If we follow our culture, we probably are spending a lot of time giving to Caesar. Get ahead, success, prestige. Who is going to buy ahead of time the new iPhone 12 that's going to be coming out? You can pre-order it, you know. Don't miss out on it. All these things. Make America great, but for what purpose? Is it a worship of Caesar? Or are we trying to make America great to be a servant to the world? Take the blessings God has given to us to bestow it upon others who are far less fortunate, especially 2/3 of the world's population that is going to suffer the most from the threat of climate change. Our choice, rendering to Caesar or rendering to God. A little story. 2 girls were on their way to school one morning. Having been detained and starting out, they were very much afraid they were going to be late. So one child said, let us kneel down and ask the Lord to help us not be late. The other girl said, no, I think I'm going to run as fast as I can and pray to God while I'm running to help me get there on time. Which child shows more faith and understanding in what God is asking of us? We don't know what's going to happen to humanity. We don't know what the future is going to hold for us. But we do know that God has planted in us the seeds of faith and all of the things that we need to expand and help other people. All we have to do is become dispensers of that grace. Amen.